In this week's episode of Brain Drain, we'll reveal some of the most bizarre and gruesome murders to ever take place on cruise ships. So disturbing that you may never want to set sail ever again. Each year, nearly 30 million people are passengers on cruise ships. Among that large population of vacation goers, an average of 200 people are killed on these ships, some of which are murders. Let's begin with the tragic story of Kenneth and Christy Manzanares. In July of 2017, the Manzanares family boarded the Emerald Princess cruise ship for some family fun. Christy and Kenneth Manzanares, their two young children, and Christy's father and brothers set sail on what seemed to be an ordinary vacation. Little did they know that these would end up being Christy's final moments. Just 2 nights into the cruise, Christy began arguing with Kenneth about his behavior. As the argument escalated, Christy Manzanares said she wanted a divorce and he needed to return to their Utah home to pack his things as soon as the ship docked in Juneau, Alaska. Kenneth did not take the news well and immediately after hearing this, told his daughters to leave the room. Their daughters left to an adjoining room with the rest of Christy's family members as their parents' argument heated up. Moments later, the girls heard screaming coming from the other room. It was clear that something was wrong. Christy's shouts could be heard through the walls amidst loud banging noises. After attempting to re-enter, the daughters were instructed by Kenneth, quote, not to come in. Rushing out to the neighboring balcony, they witnessed in horror as their father beat their mother and slammed her against the wall, then dragged her by the ankles back into the room. Banging and screaming filled the quiet halls as Kenneth brutally beat his wife to death. He continued attacking his wife in a cold-blooded rage just a few feet away from their children. After hearing the commotion, Christy's brothers were finally able to enter the room, but not in time to save their beloved sister. Cruise security made their way to the bloody scene only to find the family's belongings strewn across the room. Unfortunately, they were not able to revive Christy. She died of blunt force trauma to the head and face at the age of 39. The Emerald Princess docked in Juneau the following morning, and FBI immediately arrested Kenneth Manzanares. Kenneth claimed he beat Christy because, quote, she would not stop laughing at him. Upon returning her body to her home state of Utah, she was buried in a closed casket ceremony because her face had become completely unrecognizable from Kenneth's brutal assault. After pleading not guilty in court, he was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without parole for the murder of his wife. But the story gets weirder. Barely a year after his sentencing, Kenneth was found dead in his prison cell from strangulation. Foul play was supposedly suspected, however, little was revealed surrounding the cause of his death. On June 25, 2005, George Smith and Jennifer Hagel tied the knot during a beautiful wedding ceremony in Rhode Island. It was described by George's family as a lavish affair and a, quote, storybook wedding. Immediately following the ceremony, the newlywed couple set sail on the Royal Caribbean's Brilliance of the Sea from Barcelona, Spain for their honeymoon. The pair enjoyed the start of their new life together, gambling at the casino, socializing with other passengers, and, of course, having a few drinks. Then one night, the lighthearted honeymoon fun would suddenly come to an end. While rolling at their usual table in the ship's casino, Mr. and Mrs. Smith were joined by Josh Askin, an American college student and acquaintance of theirs. As the evening festivities went on, they were joined by 3 other Russian-American students. George's fancy luxury watch and stacks of wedding cash seemed to catch the eyes of the young students, and eventually they began drinking the night away. The next morning, Jennifer woke up in a random hallway on the ship and tried to recall what happened that night. Much to her horror, a young passenger has spotted a large blood stain on the side of the ship directly under the Smiths' room. Her beloved husband was missing and presumed overboard. Security began rounding up all the passengers who had been seen with George the night before in attempts to determine just what had happened and his whereabouts. While questioning the Russian students, it became clear that something more sinister was brewing. The students claimed that George and Jennifer had become far too intoxicated at the disco. After Jennifer left with the disco's manager, they assisted an inebriated George back to his room, then left to have a room service party on their own. However, other eyewitness guests had a different story to tell. The disco manager was proven to have left without Jennifer, and the room service party was discredited by cruise staff. Guests in neighboring rooms reported hearing banging, shouting, and a loud thud during the hours the students were supposedly helping George to his room. So what really happened that night? How did George Smith spend his last living moments? Unfortunately, no one knows for sure. Years of police investigation amounted to nothing but conspiracies and half-truths from uncooperative witnesses. The prevailing theory remains that after drinking beyond his limits, George was escorted to his room by the group of students. They proceeded to rob him of his watch and cash, but once he awoke, a brawl ensued. It's still unclear whether the students intentionally pushed him off the balcony, or was it an unfortunate result of the robbery itself. Police uncovered potentially incriminating tapes to raise reasonable suspicion that George was murdered by the students, but to this day, no arrests have been made. His grieving family continues to offer a $100,000 reward for information that could lead to the conviction of his murderers. After Scott Roston, a 36-year-old chiropractor, had fallen down the stairs, he sought out treatment from a massage therapist named Karen Waltz. Despite seeing someone at the time, she became enamored with Roston's charms. They were caught up in a whirlwind relationship and tied the knot soon after in February 1988 after just 8 months of dating. To celebrate their new life together, the pair spent their honeymoon on the Stardancer cruise sailing along the Mexican coastline. However, the romantic celebration would soon come to a devastating end. Witnesses reported the couple arguing at dinner as Roston loudly berated his wife over her sweet tooth and lack of knowledge regarding silverware. Additional passengers recalled seeing them fight on the balcony multiple occasions. Although they were identified as problematic passengers, no one could have predicted the horrific events that would ensue. On the night of February 13th, Roston reported to cruise security that his wife had gone overboard while taking a jog on the ship's outdoor track. He claimed that the strong winds had pushed her overboard and he had failed to catch her in time. The U.S. Coast Guard immediately dispatched rescue teams to search for Waltz's body, but authorities soon became skeptical of his story. The night of the couple's supposed jog, there had been no strong winds or rough waters. Karen's lifeless body was discovered floating 22 miles off the coast of San Diego. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that something was amiss with Roston's story. Karen's body and clothes were filled with air, indicating that she was dead upon impact with the water. Mounting evidence pointed to Roston's involvement in her death, including injuries to his face and body which matched the shape of a wedding ring. After facing the growing and irrefutable evidence, Roston changed his story to something absolutely unimaginable. In 1979, Roston had been living in Israel while operating an unlicensed chiropractic clinic. That same year, he claimed to have been arrested for burglary charges and taken to a mental institution in which he was drugged, beaten, and traumatized. He then supposedly became a target of the Israeli mafia after refusing to marry his neighbor. Years later, he published an expose of the Israeli government to raise awareness of its corruption and human rights violations. Flash forward a few years, Roston reportedly told investigators that the murder of his wife was in fact committed by Israeli assassins as an act of revenge for publishing his book. The assassins drugged him on the night of the murder to frame him for the heinous crime. Despite sharing his elaborate story with authorities, Scott Robin Roston was sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder on October 12, 1989. This was deemed to be not a display of vengeance of foreign assassins, but an act of cold-hearted, violent murder committed by Roston himself. Here's a bonus story if you made it this far in the video. Although not a murder, this gruesome death would traumatize cruise ship riders for years to come. On December 27, 2015, passengers aboard the Carnival Ecstasy were enjoying their final evening of a 3-day cruise from Miami, Florida, when everything was soon brought to a halt. passengers Matt Davis and his wife discovered a gruesome scene straight out of a horror movie. Here's what happened. En route to their typical dinner, the couple heard grinding and crunching sounds coming from the end of the hall. As they moved closer towards the sound, the smell of iron filled the air, growing stronger with every step. Nothing could have prepared them for what they saw next. A waterfall of thick red blood was pouring from the top of the elevator as the doors struggled to open. A single passenger could be seen stuck inside, unable to pass through the sheets of blood raining down from above. The elevator gears continued to grind and squeal as cruise staff quickly arrived at the scene and placed a sheet over the horrific scene. A single sign that read, "Sorry, I'm not working right now," blocked passengers from approaching the elevator. Hordes of shocked and horrified passengers were traumatized by the graphic scene, but no one knew what was going on. After security examined the security footage from the scene, it was revealed that a 66-year-old electrician working aboard the ship had been crushed while conducting maintenance. As he attempted to make repairs, the elevator was mistakenly turned on and the weight of the passenger-filled elevator came crashing down. His body was slowly flattened by the heavy machinery, with people all around to witness the slow, painful moments of his gruesome death. Did you enjoy the video? If so, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next episode of Brain Drain.